The cold had teeth. Thessaly Vance felt them sinking into her skin, gnawing through the thin wool of her traveling cloak, biting deep into her bones, until she could no longer feel her fingers, or her feet, or anything except the relentless, savage hunger of the winter night. She stumbled through the darkness, each step a battle against the snow that had been falling for hours, piling in drifts that reached past her ankles and turned the country road into an unmarked wilderness. Her boots were soaked through. Her dress clung to her legs like a frozen shroud. Somewhere behind her, miles back, lay the wreckage of the mail coach and the bodies of the men who had stopped it. Highwaymen, 3 of them with pistols and cruel smiles. They had taken everything. The passengers' purses, jewelry, and valuables. Her small trunk with its carefully folded dresses, and her mother's pearls, the only valuable thing she owned. They had even taken the coach horses, leaving the survivors stranded on a desolate stretch of road between nowhere and nothing. Thessaly had waited with the others for help that never came. But when the coachman's breathing had grown shallow, when the older woman beside her had stopped shivering, which was somehow worse than shivering, Thessaly had made a choice: walk or die. So she walked. The snow swallowed her footprints behind her. The sky hung low and heavy, starless, moonless, offering nothing but darkness. She had stopped feeling her hands an hour ago. Her lips were cracked and bleeding. Every breath sent needles of ice into her lungs. This is how I die, she thought with strange clarity. Not in a warm bed surrounded by family. She would die in a frozen ditch on an unnamed road, and no one would find her body until spring. The thought should have terrified her completely. Instead, it brought a kind of peace, a strange and almost welcome acceptance. At least she would stop being cold. Her foot caught on something buried beneath the snow. A root, perhaps, or a stone. It did not matter. What mattered was that her frozen legs could not catch her fall, and she went down hard, the impact jarring through her body like a thunderclap. For a long moment, she simply lay there. The snow was almost soft beneath her cheek. If she closed her eyes, if she let herself drift, the cold would fade, and warmth would come. That was what they said about freezing to death. At the end, it felt like falling asleep. Her mother's face swam through her mind, her brother Gareth, with his reckless schemes and easy laugh. The letters she would never write, the life she would never live, the dreams she had packed away along with her mother's pearls when she had left home for the last time. No. The word rose from somewhere deep within her, somewhere the cold had not yet reached. No, not like this. Not alone in the dark without anyone knowing her name. Thessaly forced her frozen limbs to move, pushed herself up onto hands and knees, lifted her head, and saw the light. It flickered through the trees, perhaps half a mile distant. A warm, golden glow that seemed impossibly beautiful against the endless white and black of the winter night. A house, an estate. Civilization. She crawled at first, then staggered upright, then lurched forward in something that might have been walking if one was generous with definitions. The light pulled at her like a rope, like a promise, like the last fragile thread connecting her to life. The road curved, the trees thinned, and suddenly she was standing at the edge of a vast circular drive, staring up at the most imposing house she had ever seen. Stone walls rose 3 stories high, their windows blazing with candlelight. Twin towers flanked the entrance like silent sentinels. Even in her half-frozen state, Thessaly recognized the architecture of old money, old power, old blood. This was not merely a wealthy home. This was the seat of someone important. She took one step toward the entrance, then another. Behind her, she heard the thunder of approaching hooves. Thessaly turned too slowly, her frozen body refusing to obey her commands. She saw the massive black carriage bearing down on her, saw the 4 horses wild-eyed and snorting, and saw the driver hauling desperately on the reins. She could not move, could not scream. could only stand there, rooted to the frozen ground, as death came for her on iron wheels. The carriage slewed sideways, horses screaming, and stopped close enough that she could feel the heat from their bodies, close enough that the led horse's breath fogged against her face. For a moment, nothing moved. Then the carriage door flew open, and a voice cut through the winter silence like a blade unsheathed. "What manner of fool stands in the middle of a private drive during a snowstorm?" A man emerged from the carriage. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed entirely in black. His face was shadowed by the brim of his hat, but she could see the hard line of his jaw, the rigid set of his shoulders, and the coiled tension in every line of his body. He moved toward her with predatory grace, and when he lifted his head, the carriage lanterns caught his features fully. He was younger than she expected, perhaps 30 or 32, with black hair swept back from a face that looked carved from marble. High cheekbones, a strong nose, lips pressed into a thin line of displeasure. But it was his eyes that stopped her breath. Pale gray, cold as the winter sky, and utterly without mercy. She knew those eyes. Everyone in 3 counties knew those eyes. "You," she whispered through cracked lips. "You are the Duke of Ashworth, the man who had killed his own father, the man whose name mothers used to frighten children, the man they called the Devil of Ashworth Hall." His expression did not change. He looked at her the way one might look at an unexpected problem, something to be assessed and dealt with efficiently. "And you," he said slowly, "are about to collapse." He was right. Her vision was darkening at the edges, her legs turning to water beneath her. The last thing she saw before the blackness claimed her was his arms reaching out. And the last thing she heard was his voice, low and cold and utterly devoid of warmth. Bloody hell. Warmth returned in fragments. First came the sensation of movement, of being carried. Then the blessed heat of an interior space, the crackling whisper of a fire nearby, voices speaking in urgent tones above her head. She is half dead from exposure. A woman's voice, crisp and efficient. "Bring heated stones wrapped in flannel. Warm broth, not hot." "Who is she?" Another voice, younger, female, tinged with curiosity. "Does it matter?" This voice she recognized. Low, cold, aristocratic, the Duke. She was standing in the drive like a specter. "Nearly killed my horses." "Caius." The younger voice carried a warning. "She is freezing to death." A pause, then, grudgingly, "See that she has whatever she needs. When she wakes, I want answers." Footsteps retreated. A door closed firmly. When she woke properly, the world had changed. She was lying in an enormous bed with hangings of deep blue velvet and sheets softer than anything she had ever felt. A fire blazed in a marble fireplace across the room, casting dancing shadows across walls papered in silver and cream. Thessaly pushed herself upright, her muscles screaming in protest. She was wearing a nightgown that was not her own, made of fine linen trimmed with lace. Someone had brushed and braided her hair. "Oh, you're awake." A young woman appeared in the doorway, her face lighting with relief. She was perhaps 19 or 20, dark-haired and bright-eyed. "I am Odette Ravencroft. You have been asleep for nearly 2 days." 2 days. Thessaly's mind reeled. "Where am I?" "Ashworth Hall. My brother's carriage nearly ran you down on our drive. Do you remember?" She remembered the cold, the light, the horses bearing down on her, and those eyes, gray and merciless, cutting through the winter darkness. "Your brother," she said slowly. "The Duke." Odette's expression flickered. "You know of him." Everyone knew of him. Caius Ravencroft, the 6th Duke of Ashworth, whose name was whispered about in ways no one discussed in polite company, whose mother had fled to the continent when he was still a child. They called him the Devil of Ashworth Hall. "I should not be here," Thessaly said, throwing back the covers. If someone could arrange transport to the nearest village, I can make my own way from there. Make your way where? Odette asked gently. Without money, without belongings, without even shoes that have not been ruined beyond repair. You were robbed, miss. I apologize. I do not even know your name. Vance. Thessaly Vance. Miss Vance. Odette moved into the room. The highwaymen who attacked your coach have been apprehended. 2 of your fellow passengers survived, but your belongings were not recovered. They had already been sold. The words hit Thessaly like physical blows, her mother's pearls. Gone. The position I was traveling toward, she said, fighting to keep her voice steady. In Harrowfield, the family expecting me as governess. They will think I have abandoned them. I'm afraid that is likely. 2 days is a long time when one is expecting a new employee. No belongings, no money, no position, no references she could use since her previous employer had died 3 months ago. She was utterly, completely ruined. There must be something I can do, she said. I can work. I am educated, capable. If your household has any need of assistance, I would be grateful for even temporary employment. Actually, a new voice entered the conversation, and Thessaly's spine stiffened. The Duke stood in the doorway, filling it with his broad shoulders and dark presence. In the daylight, his features were even more striking than she remembered, and even colder. Actually, he repeated, there may be an arrangement we could discuss, one that would benefit us both. Odette's head whipped toward her brother. Caius, what are you doing? Solving a problem. He stepped into the room, his gray eyes fixed on Thessaly, with an intensity that made her want to shrink beneath the covers. Several problems, if Miss Vance is amenable. What kind of arrangement? Thessaly asked, refusing to let her voice tremble. The Duke moved to the window, presenting his profile to her. In the cold light, he looked like a portrait, beautiful and untouchable, and not quite real. My grandmother has decided that I must marry, he said flatly. She has selected a candidate, Lady Araminta Blackwood. For the past 3 months, she has orchestrated every social event to push us together. Lady Araminta has become convinced that our engagement is imminent. And you do not wish to marry her, Thessaly said. I do not wish to marry anyone. The words came out hard, final. But my grandmother is relentless. I need someone to provide a credible alternative, someone who could be presented as a potential match. Thessaly stared at him. You want me to pretend to be courted by you. I want you to be my guest for the remainder of the season, to attend events at my side, to create enough speculation about my intentions that my grandmother must acknowledge other possibilities exist. His jaw tightened. In return, you would have room and board, a wardrobe appropriate to society events, and at the end of our arrangement, letters of reference that would secure you any governess position in England. Caius, Odette said sharply, you cannot simply proposition a woman you found half dead on your drive. I am not propositioning her. I am offering her employment. Employment as your fake romantic interest. Employment as Odette's companion. He turned to face Thessaly fully. That would be the public explanation. You are a gentlewoman fallen on hard times. My sister met you through charitable work and offered you a position. Any attention I pay you would be seen as natural, given your presence in my household. It was mad. It was scandalous. It was quite possibly the most dangerous thing anyone had ever suggested to her. And yet, what choice did she have? Return to the frozen road with nothing? If I agree, she said slowly, I would have conditions. The Duke's eyebrow rose fractionally. Name them. Thessaly pushed herself more upright. If she was going to negotiate with the devil of Ashworth Hall, she would do it with her spine straight. First, my family is informed of my situation properly. A letter to my mother, explaining that I have accepted a position as Lady Odette's companion. Nothing about arrangements or deceptions. Done. Second, when this arrangement ends, I receive written references from Lady Odette and from any other members of the household who can speak to my character. Also done. Third, Thessaly met his gray eyes directly, refusing to flinch. You tell me why they call you the Devil of Ashworth Hall. I will not walk into an arrangement blind. The silence that followed was absolute. Miss Vance, he said finally, his voice dangerously soft. You presume a great deal for a woman who woke in my house wearing my sister's nightgown. I presume nothing, Your Grace. I simply wish to understand the nature of the bargain before I make it. You said this would benefit us both. I would like to know what risks I am taking in exchange for those benefits. Another silence, longer this time. Then, impossibly, the Duke's lips curved into something that was almost a smile. It did not reach his eyes, but it transformed his face nonetheless, making him look less like a marble statue and more like a man. You have more steel in you than you appear to, Miss Vance. Appearances are often deceiving, Your Grace. So they are. He moved toward the door, pausing with his hand on the frame. We will discuss the terms of your third condition over dinner this evening. If you are well enough to negotiate, you are well enough to join us at table. Odette will have appropriate clothing sent to your room. He was gone before she could respond. Odette let out a breath that sounded like it had been held for several minutes. Well, she said, her eyes sparkling with something that looked dangerously like excitement. That was unexpected. Is he always like that? Thessaly asked faintly. Like what? Dramatic? Imperious? Completely incapable of normal human interaction? Odette grinned. Yes, always. But Miss Vance, I must tell you something. What? Odette leaned forward, her voice dropping conspiratorially. That is the most my brother has spoken to anyone outside of business matters since our father died 8 months ago. Whatever you are doing, whatever this arrangement becomes, I think you might be exactly what this house needs. She swept toward the door, leaving Thessaly alone with her racing thoughts and the lingering chill of gray eyes that had looked at her like she was a problem to be solved. Or perhaps, she thought with a shiver, that had nothing to do with cold, something more dangerous altogether. The dress Odette sent was the color of winter moonlight. Thessaly stood before the full-length mirror in her borrowed room, hardly recognizing the woman who stared back at her. The silver-gray silk draped elegantly across her shoulders, cinched at her waist with a ribbon of darker charcoal, then fell in soft folds to the floor. Her dark hair had been arranged by a maid named Nell, who had appeared with pins and determination, and transformed Thessaly's simple waves into something approaching artistry. She looked like someone who belonged in a house like this. She felt like an imposter wearing a costume. You look beautiful, Odette said from the doorway, her own gown a cheerful shade of primrose that suited her coloring perfectly. Caius will not know what to say. I suspect your brother always knows what to say. Whether he chooses to say it is another matter. Odette laughed, linking her arm through Thessaly's. Come. Grandmother will be joining us tonight. The dining room was smaller than she expected, intended for family rather than formal entertaining. A fire blazed in the hearth, casting warm light across a table set for 4. The Duke stood by the mantelpiece, a glass of something amber in his hand, and seated in the chair closest to the fire, watching Thessaly's entrance with eyes that missed nothing, was possibly the most intimidating woman she had ever seen. The Dowager Duchess of Ashworth was small and silver-haired, wrapped in black silk. Her face was lined with age, but beautiful still, and her eyes, the same pale gray as her grandson's, held a sharpness that made Thessaly feel like a butterfly pinned beneath glass. So, the Dowager said before anyone could make introductions, this is the frozen waif my grandson has decided to collect. Grandmother, Odette said with forced brightness, this is Miss Thessaly Vance, She will be staying with us as my companion. I am aware of the official story." The dowager's gaze did not waver from Thessaly's face. "Come here, girl. Let me look at you properly." Thessaly approached, her chin lifted despite the terror clawing at her chest. She curtsied with all the grace her mother had drilled into her. "Your Grace, it is an honor to meet you." "Is it? How charming." The dowager gestured for her to rise. "You have good bones. Your curtsy is acceptable. Your accent suggests education, though not wealth. You are precisely the sort of woman my grandson should not be seen with if he wishes to maintain any semblance of respectability." "Grandmother," the Duke said from the mantelpiece. "A warning. Do not grandmother me, Caius. I am not blind. You think I do not know what you are doing?" The dowager's lips curved. "The entire county will be talking about this by morning. Let them talk. Easy words for a duke, less easy for a young woman with no fortune and no family to protect her reputation." The dowager turned back to Thessaly. "Do you understand what you are agreeing to, Miss Vance?" "I understand that I had no options 3 days ago," Thessaly said steadily. "And now I have one. I will not reject it simply because society might disapprove. Society will more than disapprove. Society will shred you. Lady Araminta has friends who would enjoy nothing more than destroying a rival. Then I will give them nothing to destroy." The dowager studied her for a long moment. "Sit down," she said finally. "You may as well eat, while you explain to me exactly how you plan to survive the wolves." Dinner was an education in unspoken tensions. The dowager asked questions with the precision of a surgeon, extracting information about Thessaly's family, her education, her previous employment. Thessaly answered as honestly as she dared, painting a picture of genteel poverty without self-pity. Beside her, Odette offered encouraging smiles. Across the table, the Duke ate in silence, his gray eyes moving between the 3 women, with an expression Thessaly could not read. "Your father," the dowager said over the fish course. "He lost his business to what, exactly?" "A partner who proved dishonest, Your Grace. My father trusted him with significant capital. The partner disappeared with the funds." "And your brother?" "This Gareth you mentioned. He has not been able to rebuild what was lost." Thessaly's jaw tightened. "My brother has many admirable qualities, Your Grace. Financial acumen is not among them." "She means he is a dreamer who chases schemes," Odette supplied, rather like Felix Finch. The Duke set down his fork. "I think Miss Vance's family circumstances are her own concern. The story is plausible because it is true." Thessaly surprised herself with her sharpness. "I am a gentleman's daughter, who lost everything through no fault of my own. I was traveling to honest employment when I was robbed of what little I had left. Your grandson's carriage nearly killed me, and now I am sitting at your table being interrogated, as if I chose my family's failures." Silence fell like a blade. The dowager's eyebrows rose. Odette looked delighted, and the Duke was watching Thessaly with something that might have been respect. "You have fire," the dowager observed. "That will serve you well. Lady Araminta is all ice and calculation." She reached for her wine glass. "You have passed my first assessment, Miss Vance. But understand me clearly. I do not approve of this scheme. I think it will end in disaster. However, I know my grandson well enough to recognize when arguing is pointless. I will be watching you. Very closely." "I would expect nothing less, Your Grace." After dinner, they withdrew to a sitting room where Odette played the pianoforte. Thessaly found herself standing by the window, watching the snow fall, when she felt the Duke's presence beside her. "You handled her well," he said. "Most people wilt under her scrutiny. I have been interrogated by worse. The families I worked for before were not always kind. And yet you chose that life. Governessing. Serving. I chose survival, Your Grace, as I am choosing it now." She turned to meet his eyes. "You said you would explain. Why they call you the Devil of Ashworth Hall." His jaw tightened. For a moment, she thought he would refuse. Instead, he moved closer to the window, his voice dropping. "My father died 8 months ago, in this house, in his study. He had been ill for some time, but no one expected the end to come so quickly. I was in London when I received word. By the time I arrived, he had been dead for 6 hours. "I'm sorry," Thessaly said. "Do not be. Not yet." His eyes remained fixed on the falling snow. "The night before he died, we argued. Badly. He wanted me to return to the estate, to spend his remaining time with him. I refused. I had obligations, matters that seemed important at the time. I told him I would come when I could. You could not have known." "No, but everyone else believes I could." He turned to face her, and in his eyes, she saw something that shocked her. Pain. Raw and bleeding and carefully hidden behind walls of ice. The servants' talk. Word spread that we argued, that I left despite his plea, that I was not here when he drew his last breath. And because people love a villain, the story transformed. I became the cold-hearted son who abandoned his father. The devil who valued money more than family. That is not what happened. It does not matter what happened. It matters what people believe. His smile was bitter. So when you ask why they call me the Devil of Ashworth Hall, the answer is simple. I gave them a single moment of weakness, and they built an entire mythology around it. Thessaly studied him, seeing him properly for the first time. Not the cold, forbidding Duke, but a grieving son, wrapped in armor of his own making. "The point," she said, "would be that you are not the monster they believe you to be, and perhaps you deserve to have someone know that." For a long moment, he simply looked at her. "You are a strange woman, Miss Vance," the Duke said finally. "I have been told that before, Your Grace." "Caius," the word came out almost involuntarily. "If we are to do this, if we are to convince anyone that I might actually be interested in you, then you cannot call me Your Grace, as if I am a stranger." "Caius, then." The name felt foreign on her tongue, too intimate, too real. "And I will call you Thessaly. It is an unusual name. My mother was fond of Greek history. She wanted to give me something memorable. She succeeded." He turned back to the window, but some of the ice had melted from his posture. "Tomorrow, Odette will take you to the village for clothing. We have a dinner party in 3 days. The Blackwoods will be there, including Lady Araminta. It will be your first test. I will be ready. Will you?" He glanced at her sideways. "Lady Araminta has been groomed for this world since birth. She knows every rule, every nuance, every weapon that society provides. You have 3 days to prepare for battle against someone who has been training her entire life." "Then I had better be a quick study." Thessaly met his gaze without flinching. "I may not know the rules of your world, Caius, but I know how to survive, and I know how to fight when I have no other choice." Something shifted in his expression, interest perhaps, or recognition. "Then perhaps," he said slowly, "this arrangement will not be the disaster my grandmother predicts." He walked away, leaving Thessaly alone by the window, with her racing heart and the growing certainty that she had just agreed to something far more complicated than a simple business transaction. Because when she looked at Caius Ravencroft, the so-called Devil of Ashworth Hall, she didn't see a monster. She saw a man in pain, a man who had built walls so high that no one could reach him. And something inside her, something foolish and dangerous and utterly irrational, wanted to try climbing those walls anyway. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering the world in white, hiding all traces of the frozen road where she had nearly died. Inside Ashworth Hall, in her borrowed dress with her borrowed future, Thessaly Vance made a silent vow. Whatever happened next, whatever this arrangement demanded of her, she would not let herself forget that this was temporary. A performance, a feuilleton, a means to an end. She would not let herself fall. She repeated it like a prayer as she watched the snow. She would not fall. Morning at Ashworth Hall arrived wrapped in pale winter sunshine. Thessaly woke in her borrowed bed, momentarily disoriented by the softness of the sheets and the warmth of the fire that someone had already stoked. At home, she would have been the one lighting fires, hauling water. Here, invisible hands had accomplished everything while she slept. Nell appeared with breakfast on a tray. Behind her came 2 more maids carrying boxes and packages. From the village, Nell explained. Lady Odette sent word yesterday evening. The dressmaker worked through the night. The boxes contained more clothing than Thessaly had owned in her entire life. Morning dresses in soft blues and creams, evening gowns that seemed to glow with their own inner light. This is too much, she whispered. I cannot accept all of this. You can, and you will. Odette swept into the room. We have 3 days to transform you into someone who can hold her own against Lady Araminta. That requires armor. Beautiful, expensive, perfectly fitted armor. I thought I was supposed to be your companion, not a rival for your brother's affections. You are supposed to be whatever the situation requires. Odette held up a walking dress of deep forest green. This one for today. We are going to the village. Shoes, gloves, hair ribbons, and most importantly, you need to be seen. Odette's eyes sparkled. The best way to control gossip is to give people something specific to gossip about. We are going to give them the story of a tragic gentlewoman rescued by my charitable nature. By the time Lady Araminta hears of you, you will already be defined by our terms. The village of Ashworth Cross was charming in the way of places that had been charming for centuries. Stone cottages lined the main street, their thatched roofs dusted with snow. Shopkeepers emerged to bow and smile as Lady Odette passed, their eyes sliding to Thessaly with naked curiosity. Miss Thessaly Vance, Odette announced to everyone they encountered. My dear friend from Wiltshire. She has agreed to stay with us for the season after a most unfortunate incident with highwaymen. The poor dear lost everything. The story spread like fire through dry grass. By the time they reached the milliner's shop, Thessaly had already seen 2 women hurrying away to share the news. You are very good at this, she said, as they settled back into the carriage. I have been navigating society since I was 16. One learns the rules, or one gets devoured. May I ask you something? Your brother. The stories about him. He told me about your father, about the argument. But there seems to be more. Odette's expression flickered. There is always more. People see Caius, and they see cold, formality, and distance. They do not see the boy who sat by our mother's empty chair for a year after she left. Your mother left? When I was 7. Caius was 14. Odette's voice had lost its brightness. She could not bear the isolation of country life. One morning she was simply gone. A letter on her pillow saying she had fled to Italy with a painter she had met in London. That must have been devastating. For Caius, more than anyone, he adored her, and she left without even saying goodbye. Odette turned to look out the carriage window. Our father never recovered. He loved her completely, and her abandonment broke something inside him. Is she still alive? We do not know. Caius tried to find her once, when he was 21. He hired investigators. He found evidence that she had died in Naples 3 years after leaving us. A fever, apparently. She was buried in a pauper's grave because the painter had already abandoned her. Thessaly's heart clenched. He never told anyone, Odette continued, about finding her grave. He came home from that trip and locked himself in his study for 3 days. When he emerged, he was different. Colder. As if he had decided that feelings were too dangerous to be allowed. And then his father died, Thessaly thought. Another abandonment. Why are you telling me this? she asked. Because I see the way he looks at you. Like you are a puzzle he cannot solve. Like you might be something worth the risk of feeling again. It has been 3 days. He barely knows me. Sometimes 3 days is enough to recognize something important. Odette squeezed her hand. Just be careful. With him and with yourself. Hearts do not follow contracts, no matter how carefully the terms are negotiated. The carriage turned through the gates of Ashworth Hall, but Odette's words echoed in her mind. Hearts do not follow contracts. And she wondered, with growing unease, whether she was already beginning to climb those walls. The summons came the next morning. The Dowager Duchess requests your presence in her private sitting room, immediately. The Dowager's sitting room was decorated in shades of blue and silver. The old woman sat in a chair by the fire, her gray eyes tracking Thessaly's entrance with unsettling intensity. Close the door and sit. Thessaly obeyed, choosing a chair across from the older woman. You spoke with Odette yesterday, in the carriage. She told you about my daughter-in-law, about Caius's mother. It was not a question. She told me some things, Your Grace. And what did you think? I thought it explained a great deal about your grandson, about why he has built such walls around himself. Walls. The Dowager's lips curved. Is that what you see? I see a man who has been abandoned by the people who should have loved him most. First his mother, then in a different way, his father. And you think you can change that? In a few weeks of play acting at courtship? I think nothing of the sort, Your Grace. I am here because I had no other options. The Dowager studied her for a long moment. Let me tell you what I see, Miss Vance. I see a young woman who has lost everything and found herself in a position of unexpected power. My grandson needs you, or at least he believes he does. That gives you leverage. The question is what you intend to do with it. I intend to fulfill my end of the bargain and leave with references that will allow me to build a proper life. Nothing more. Nothing more. The Dowager repeated the words. You do not want his fortune? His title? I want security, Your Grace. I want to never again find myself freezing on a country road with no options and no hope. Being a duchess is not a life I have ever dreamed of. How refreshingly practical. The Dowager leaned back. Lady Araminta wants the title very much. She has been groomed for it since childhood. Then why does he resist so strongly? Because Lady Araminta, for all her breeding and beauty, has the emotional depth of a china plate. She would be a perfect duchess. She would manage his household, produce heirs, host brilliant parties. But she would never reach him, never challenge him, never force him to feel anything at all. Thessaly heard what the Dowager was not saying. You do not want a perfect duchess for him. I want my grandson to live. The words came out sharp. He has been a ghost since his father died, going through the motions, performing his duties, retreating into that study like a tomb. When his mother left, he was devastated, but he was still alive. Now I fear he has simply stopped. And you think I can help with that? I think you already have. He spoke more words at dinner 2 nights ago than he has spoken in months. He looked at you with something that was not emptiness. Annoyance is not exactly the foundation for a successful courtship. Annoyance can become interest. Interest can become affection. The Dowager's expression grew distant. Love is worth the risk of loss, Miss Vance. It is the only thing that is. You want me to make your grandson fall in love with me? Thessaly said slowly. I want you to give him the opportunity to feel something genuine. Whether he takes that opportunity is up to him. The Dowager's voice hardened. But understand me clearly. If you manipulate him, if you pretend feelings you do not have, simply to secure your position, I will know, and I will destroy you. With respect, Your Grace, you threatened to destroy me 2 days ago if I hurt him. Did I? Good. Then you understand the stakes. The Dowager rose. There is something else you should know. The night before my son died, he gave Caius something. A letter, sealed with instructions not to open it until he was ready. Caius has never opened it. He keeps it locked in his desk, unopened, 8 months now. Thessaly waited, her heart pounding. I believe my son knew he was dying. I believe he had something important to tell Caius. And I believe Caius will not open that letter because he is afraid of what it might contain. What do you think it contains? Forgiveness. The word hung in the air like smoke. For the argument, for leaving, for not being there at the end. My son loved Caius completely, despite everything. He would have wanted him to know that. She left without another word. Thessaly sat alone in the silver-blue sitting room, her mind churning. A mother who abandoned him, a father who died without goodbye. A letter that might hold the key to his healing, locked away because opening it was too frightening. She was beginning to understand that saving her might not have been the point. Perhaps in his own cold and calculating way, he had been trying to save himself. The next 2 days passed in a blur of preparation. A dancing master arrived from London, a tiny Frenchman named Monsieur Bertrand, who spoke entirely in exclamations. They practiced the waltz until her feet ached, the quadrille until her head spun. Odette coached her on conversation, drilling her on the family histories of everyone who would attend the dinner party. Lady Araminta will test you, Odette warned. Small barbs disguised as compliments. Questions designed to expose your background. You must not let her see you bleed. Through it all, Caius remained absent. She saw him at meals, brief encounters where he sat at the head of the table and spoke mainly to his grandmother about estate business. He nodded to her politely, inquired about her preparations, and then retreated to his study. But on the evening before the dinner party, something changed. Thessaly had retreated to the library after another grueling session with Monsieur Bertrand. She was curled in a chair, a volume of poetry open on her lap, when she heard the door open. Caius stood in the doorway, looking almost uncertain. With his jacket removed and his cravat loosened, he looked younger, more human, more vulnerable. I did not expect anyone to be here, he said. I can leave if you prefer. No. Stay. I have been meaning to speak with you. Privately. Thessaly set aside her book, watching as he moved to the fireplace. Tomorrow will be difficult, he said. Lady Araminta is intelligent and ruthless. She will try to eliminate you as a threat. Your sister has warned me. My sister sees the best in everyone. She does not fully understand how vicious Araminta can be. Caius turned to face her. I brought you into this situation. I feel responsible for whatever happens. I agreed to the arrangement with full knowledge of the risks. Did you? Did you really understand what you were agreeing to? He took a step closer, his voice dropping. When I found you on that road, you were half dead. Desperate. You would have agreed to almost anything for the chance at survival. I took advantage of that desperation, and I have been trying to convince myself it was mutually beneficial. But the truth is, he stopped, jaw tightening. The truth is what? Thessaly prompted softly. The truth is that I needed someone, and you were convenient. I did not stop to consider what it would cost you, the scrutiny, the gossip, the permanent stain on your reputation if this goes wrong. His hands clenched at his sides. You deserve to know that I am not the hero of this story, Thessaly. I am simply a man who saw a solution to his problems and took it, regardless of the consequences to anyone else. She studied him in the firelight, this man who had been painted as a devil by the world, but who stood before her, now confessing his sins, as if seeking absolution. May I tell you something? She asked. He nodded, wariness in his eyes. 3 days ago I was lying in the snow, waiting to die. I had accepted it, made peace with it even. And then I saw the lights of this house, and something inside me refused to surrender. She rose from her chair, moving closer to him. You did not take advantage of my desperation, Caius. You gave me a choice when I had none. That is not villainy. That is simply two people helping each other survive. You make it sound noble. It wasn't noble. Perhaps not. But it wasn't wicked either. She stopped a few feet from him, close enough to see the tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw worked, as if chewing on words he could not quite speak. You are so determined to be the villain of your own story. Why? The question hung between them, dangerous and intimate. For a long moment he did not answer. Then, slowly, some of the rigidity left his posture. Because if I am the villain, then I deserve what I have lost, he said quietly. My mother left because I was not enough to make her stay. My father died because I chose business over family. If those are my failings, my choices, then at least the universe makes sense. At least there is someone to blame. And if there is no one to blame, if sometimes terrible things simply happen to people who do not deserve them, then there is no order, no meaning, just chaos and loss and pain with no purpose. His voice cracked slightly. I cannot accept that, Thessaly. I cannot. She understood then, in a way she had not before. His coldness was not cruelty. It was control. If he could assign blame, if he could identify the cause, then he could prevent it from happening again. Build walls high enough. Keep everyone distant enough. Never let anyone close enough to leave. My father lost everything because of a man he trusted, she said softly. For years, I blamed him. If he had been more careful, more suspicious, less willing to believe the best of people. But the truth is, he was betrayed. The fault lies with the man who betrayed him, not with my father, for having faith. She reached out, her hand hovering near his arm but not quite touching. You are not to blame for your mother's choices, Caius. You were a child, and you are not to blame for your father's death. You were a son trying to build something, to prove yourself worthy. He would not have wanted you to carry this guilt. You do not know that. I know that no father who loved his son would want him to suffer like this. Her voice gentled. The letter your grandmother mentioned, the one he gave you before he died. Perhaps the answers you need are in there. Caius went very still. She told you about the letter. She told me you have not opened it. I cannot. The words came out rough, broken. What if it says I should have been there? What if his last words to me are condemnation instead of... He could not finish the sentence. Instead of forgiveness? Thessaly completed softly. His silence was answer enough. She let her hand finally rest on his arm, feeling the tension vibrating through him like a plucked string. When my father's business collapsed, she said, he stood in our parlor and apologized for failing us. He looked at my mother, at my brother, at me, and he said he was sorry for destroying everything he had built. And my mother, my quiet, gentle mother, she walked up to him and took his face in her hands and said, You did not destroy anything. You were robbed, and we will survive this together. Thessaly met Caius's eyes, holding his gaze. Forgiveness is not about deserving, Caius. It is about love. And I don't believe your father wrote you a letter of condemnation. I believe he wrote you a letter of love, and you are too afraid to receive it because you have convinced yourself you do not deserve to be loved. The firelight flickered between them. The clock on the mantel ticked steady seconds into the silence. And then, Caius did something she did not expect. He covered her hand with his own. You are either the wisest woman I have ever met, he said slowly, or the most foolish. I have not yet determined which. Perhaps I am both. A ghost of a smile touched his lips, the first real smile she had seen from him. Perhaps you are. His thumb traced across her knuckles once, a gesture so small it might have been accidental. Then he stepped back, the moment broken. Tomorrow will be difficult. Get some rest. You will need your strength for what is coming. He left the library without looking back. Thessaly stood alone among the books, her hand still warm where he had touched it, her heart beating a rhythm she did not quite recognize. She had come to Ashworth Hall to survive. She was beginning to fear she might be doing something far more dangerous. She might be starting to feel. The dinner party arrived with the inevitability of a gathering storm. Nell finished securing the final pin in Thessaly's hair and stepped back with a satisfied nod. The ivory gown with silver thread had been Odette's choice, and Thessaly had to admit it suited her. The fabric caught the candlelight beautifully, and the small diamonds borrowed from Odette added just enough sparkle without appearing ostentatious. She felt ready, or as ready as anyone could feel marching into battle. "You are stunning," Odette declared from the doorway, resplendent in pale lavender silk. "Araminta will be beside herself with jealousy. I would prefer she simply ignore me." "That is not how Araminta operates. She cannot ignore a threat. She must eliminate it." Odette crossed the room to squeeze Thessaly's hands. "But you are ready. I have seen you practice, seen you learn. You have absorbed more in 3 days than most young ladies learn in a year. Trust yourself." Trust herself, as if that were simple. They descended the grand staircase together, and Thessaly's breath caught at the transformation of Ashworth Hall. Candles blazed in every chandelier, casting warm light across arrangements of winter flowers and greenery. Servants moved with silent efficiency, carrying trays of champagne and delicate hors d'oeuvres. The house that had seemed cold and forbidding now glowed with warmth and welcome. And at the bottom of the stairs, waiting in formal evening wear that made him look even more imposing than usual, stood Caius. His gray eyes tracked her descent with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. When she reached the bottom step, he offered his arm with precise formality. "Miss Vance, you look—" He paused, seeming to struggle with the words. "Adequate?" she suggested with a small smile. "Extraordinary." The word came out low, almost reluctant, as if it had escaped against his will. "You look extraordinary." Before she could respond, the sound of arriving carriages drew their attention to the entrance hall. The battle was beginning. Lord and Lady Blackwood arrived first, her ladyship a sharp-featured woman in burgundy silk, who examined Thessaly with barely concealed disdain. Behind them came Sir Percival and Lady Morgause Hatch, elderly and kind-eyed, who greeted everyone with genuine warmth. The Honorable Crispin Threlfall drifted in alone, his artistic pretensions evident in his flowing cravat and the paint stains he had not quite managed to remove from his fingers. And then, like a queen arriving at court, Lady Araminta Blackwood made her entrance. She was beautiful. Thessaly had expected that, had prepared herself for it, but the reality still struck like a blow. Golden hair arranged in perfect ringlets, porcelain skin unmarred by any imperfection, blue eyes that sparkled with intelligence and calculation. Her gown was rose silk, trimmed with silver, cut in the absolute height of fashion, and she wore it with the confidence of someone who had never doubted her place in the world. "Your Grace," she said, curtsying to Caius with practiced grace. "How wonderful to see you. And this must be the mysterious Miss Vance I have heard so much about." Her smile was warm, her eyes were ice. "Lady Araminta." Thessaly curtsied in return. "The pleasure is mine. Your gown is exquisite. Rose is certainly your color." "How kind." Araminta's gaze swept over Thessaly's dress with barely concealed assessment. "Yours is lovely as well. Such a classic style. Almost timeless, one might say." The emphasis on almost was deliberate, a suggestion that Thessaly's gown was dated, old-fashioned, and not quite current. "I find that classics endure while fashions fade," Thessaly replied pleasantly. "But I bow to your expertise in such matters." Something flickered in Araminta's eyes, the first acknowledgement that Thessaly might not be the easy target she had expected. Dinner was an elaborate affair of 7 courses, each more delicious than the last. Thessaly had been seated between Sir Percival, who talked endlessly of his hunting dogs, and Crispin Threlfall, who talked endlessly of himself. Across the table, Araminta held court beside Caius, laughing prettily at things he said, and touching his arm with casual intimacy. Thessaly watched them together, and felt something twist in her chest that she refused to examine too closely. "Miss Vance," Lady Blackwood's voice cut across the table during a lull in conversation. "I understand you came to us from Wiltshire. Your family's estate is located where, precisely?" The question was a trap. An estate implied wealth, land, position. Thessaly had none of those things. "My family's circumstances are modest, Lady Blackwood," she replied steadily. "We maintain a small residence in the village of Thornbury. My late father was a merchant before his health failed." A murmur ran around the table. She had just admitted, publicly, that she wasn't one of consequence. A merchant. Araminta's voice dripped with false sympathy. "How enterprising. And you were traveling to a governess position when you encountered those dreadful highwaymen? How terrifying that must have been." "It was." Thessaly met the other woman's eyes directly. "But I have found that adversity reveals character. Some people crumble in the face of difficulty. Others discover strengths they did not know they possessed." "And which are you, Miss Vance?" "I am still here, Lady Araminta. That should answer your question." Silence fell across the table. The Dowager made a small sound that might have been approval. Caius's expression remained unreadable, but his gray eyes had sharpened with something that looked like respect. Araminta's smile never wavered, but her knuckles whitened around her wine glass. After dinner, the party withdrew to the music room, where Odette was prevailed upon to play. She obliged with cheerful incompetence, her wrong notes providing cover for quieter conversations around the room. Thessaly found herself cornered near the window by Araminta and her mother, their expressions suggesting that the real interrogation was about to begin. "Tell me, Miss Vance," Lady Blackwood said sweetly, "how did you come to be on Lady Odette's charity list? I was not aware she engaged in such outreach." "Lady Odette learned of my situation through her charitable connections," Thessaly said, keeping her voice even. "She graciously offered assistance." "How fortunate for you." Araminta's eyes glittered. To have landed in such comfortable circumstances after such a disaster, one might almost think it was planned. "I assure you, Lady Araminta, I did not plan to be robbed at gunpoint and left to freeze on a country road." "Of course not. But one must admit the outcome has been quite advantageous for someone in your position." Araminta leaned closer, dropping her voice to a confidential murmur. "The Duke is a valuable prize, Miss Vance. Many women have tried to catch his attention. Many have failed. It would be a shame if someone were to waste his time with unrealistic ambitions." The threat was clear, delivered with a smile that could have graced a portrait. "I have no ambitions regarding the Duke," Thessaly replied quietly. "I am Lady Odette's companion. Nothing more." "How refreshingly modest." Araminta straightened, her voice returning to normal volume. "I do hope that remains true. For your sake. Society can be so cruel to those who overreach their station." She swept away, leaving Thessaly standing alone by the window, her hands trembling with suppressed anger. She had survived the first battle, but she had no illusions about the war to come. Later, as the guests departed in a flurry of polite farewells, Caius appeared beside her in the entrance hall. "You handled yourself well," he said quietly. "Better than I expected." Lady Araminta made her position very clear. "Did she?" His jaw tightened. "What did she say?" "Nothing worth repeating. Just the opening moves in a game I did not ask to play." Caius studied her face in the candlelight, his expression unreadable. Then, slowly, he reached into his coat and withdrew a small velvet box. "I had intended to give this to you before the party, but there was no time." He pressed the box into her hands. "It belonged to my mother. Before she left. She gave it to Odette, who gave it to me, who has never known what to do with it." Thessaly opened the box with trembling fingers. Inside, nestled on dark velvet, lay a pendant, a single sapphire, deep blue as a winter twilight, surrounded by small diamonds and suspended on a delicate silver chain. It was exquisite. It was priceless. It was impossibly intimate. "I cannot accept this," she breathed. "You can. You must." His voice roughened. "Araminta will escalate. She always does. When she sees you wearing this, she will know that you have my protection. My genuine protection, not merely the story we have constructed. And what will everyone else think when they see me wearing the Duke's mother's jewelry? They will think that I have made my choice." He met her eyes, and something in his gaze made her breath catch. "Let them think it, Thessaly. Let them wonder. It will make our performance more convincing." But was it still a performance? Looking at him now, with the candlelight softening his features, and something almost vulnerable in his gray eyes, Thessaly was no longer certain. "Thank you," she whispered. He nodded once, sharply, and walked away. Thessaly stood alone in the entrance hall, holding his mother's sapphire in her hands, and wondered when exactly this arrangement had stopped being simple. The days following the dinner party passed in a strange, suspended state, neither comfortable nor entirely tense. Thessaly wore the sapphire pendant everywhere, feeling its weight against her collarbone, like a promise she did not fully understand. Servants noticed. Odette noticed, though she said nothing, only smiled in a way that suggested she knew something Thessaly did not. The dowager noticed, her gray eyes sharp with assessment every time they landed on the jewel. And Caius watched her with an intensity that made her skin prickle with awareness every time they were in the same room. They fell into a pattern of sorts, meals together, during which conversation remained carefully neutral. Afternoons when Thessaly helped Odette with correspondence or walked the grounds of the estate, learning its paths and gardens despite the winter cold. Evenings in the library, where she would read and Caius would work at his desk, their silence companionable rather than awkward. It was on one such evening, 5 days after the dinner party, that everything shifted. Thessaly had been reading by the fire, a volume of poetry she had discovered tucked between heavier tomes, when she became aware of Caius standing beside her chair. She had not heard him approach. "You found it," he said quietly. "Found what?" He gestured to the book in her hands, a slim volume, leather-bound and well-worn, its spine cracked from frequent reading. "My mother's poetry collection. She left it behind when she went. It was one of the few things of hers that remained." Thessaly looked down at the book with new eyes. The margins were filled with small notes in a feminine hand, observations and reactions to various verses. A woman's soul laid bare on the pages of someone else's words. "She loved poetry," Thessaly said softly. "She loved many things: poetry, painting, music, my father." His voice hardened. None of it was enough to make her stay. Perhaps it was not about enough. Perhaps she was simply broken in some way, unable to receive love even when it was freely given. Caius moved to the window, his posture rigid. "You are generous in your interpretations. I'm trying to understand." She set the book aside and rose, moving to stand beside him. "You keep her things, her jewelry, her poetry. You speak of her with pain, not hatred. Some part of you still loves her. Some part of me will always love her. She was my mother." He turned to face her, and the raw emotion in his eyes took her breath away. "But I also hate her, for leaving, for choosing someone else over us, for dying in poverty and anonymity when she could have been here, safe, loved. You can feel both things, love and hate. They are not opposites. What are they, then? Two sides of the same coin. You cannot hate someone you never loved. The depth of your anger reflects the depth of your attachment." She paused, choosing her next words carefully. "Have you ever considered that perhaps she hated herself most of all. That leaving was not about rejecting you, but about escaping something inside her that she could not bear. Caius was silent for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed. A bitter sound, but real. You should have been a philosopher, Miss Vance. I should have been many things, Your Grace. Life had other plans. He turned to face her fully, and suddenly they were standing very close. Close enough that she could see the individual shades of gray in his eyes, like storm clouds gathering over winter fields. Close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body, despite the chill of the window behind him. Thessaly. Her name in his voice was a caress. I find myself in unfamiliar territory. What territory is that? Feeling things I did not authorize myself to feel. His hand rose as if of its own accord, brushing a strand of hair from her temple. Wanting things I have no right to want. Her heart hammered against her ribs. What things? You. The word was barely a whisper. I want you, Thessaly Vance. Not as part of an arrangement. Not as a solution to my problems. I want you because when I am near you, I remember what it felt like to be alive. She should step back, should remind him of their agreement, of the impossibility of anything real between them. She was a merchant's daughter with nothing. He was a duke with everything. The chasm between their worlds was unbridgeable. But when his lips met hers, soft and questioning, every rational thought dissolved like snow in sunlight. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, as if he was waiting for her to push him away. When she did not, when instead she leaned into him, her hands finding his shoulders, something shifted. The gentleness became urgency. His arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her closer, and she melted against him with a small sound that might have been surrender. When they finally broke apart, both breathing unsteadily, his forehead rested against hers. Tell me to stop, he murmured. Tell me this is madness, and I will never speak of it again. It is madness, she whispered back. Complete and utter madness. And yet you are not telling me to stop. No. She pulled back enough to meet his eyes. I am not. For a moment, something like joy flickered across his features. Then reality crashed back, bringing with it the weight of their impossible circumstances. My grandmother will never accept this, he said quietly. Society will tear you apart. I know. Lady Araminta will make your life a living torment. I know that too. Then why? His voice cracked. Why would you choose this? Choose me? Thessaly reached up to cup his face in her hands, feeling the tension in his jaw, the vulnerability beneath his careful control. Because you asked me once what I wanted for myself. I said I wanted security, safety, a life without fear. She smiled, soft and sad. But what I truly want, what I have always wanted and never allowed myself to hope for, is to be seen. Truly seen. Not as a servant or a burden or a solution to someone's problems. As myself. Flawed and frightened and fiercely determined to survive. I see you, he said roughly. God help me, Thessaly. I see you. She kissed him again, pouring into it everything she could not say. The fear and the hope and the terrifying realization that she had done the one thing she had sworn not to do. She had fallen. Completely and irrevocably fallen. The question now was whether either of them could survive the landing. The morning after the kiss, Thessaly woke to find her world subtly transformed. Everything looked the same. The elegant room, the cheerful fire, Nell arriving with breakfast on a tray. But beneath the surface, everything had shifted. She was no longer playing a role. She was living a truth that terrified her. She loved him. The realization sat in her chest like a stone, heavy and undeniable. She loved Caius Ravencroft, the Duke of Ashworth, the man they called a devil. She loved his wounded heart and his fierce protection of those he cared for. She loved his reluctant humor and his stubborn grief, and the way he looked at her, as if she were the answer to a question he had stopped asking. And she had absolutely no idea what to do about it. She did not see him that morning, or that afternoon. A messenger arrived with word that the Duke had been called away on urgent estate business and would return before evening. Thessaly tried to read, tried to walk the gardens, tried to do anything that would stop her mind from spinning through possibilities and fears and hopes she had no right to feel. She was in the music room, attempting to distract herself with needlework she was terrible at, when the Dowager appeared in the doorway. "Miss Vance, I would speak with you." The old woman's voice carried none of its usual acidity. That was somehow worse. Thessaly followed her to the private sitting room, her heart sinking with every step. "Close the door." She obeyed, then stood waiting as the Dowager settled into her chair with the careful movements of someone whose joints protested activity. "I saw you," the Dowager said without preamble. "Last night, through the library door." Thessaly's blood froze. "I saw my grandson kiss you, and I saw you kiss him back." There was no point in lying, no point in pretending. "Yes, Your Grace." "Do you love him?" The question cut straight to the heart of everything. "Yes." The word came out barely above a whisper. "I did not intend to. I did everything I could to prevent it. But yes, I love him." The Dowager studied her with those piercing gray eyes, so like her grandson's, and Thessaly waited for the destruction that would surely follow. "I believe you," the Dowager said finally, "which makes what I must tell you all the more difficult." "Your Grace? Lady Araminta's mother visited me this morning while you were walking in the gardens. She came with information about you, about your brother." The stone in Thessaly's chest turned to ice. "My brother? Gareth Vance, correct? He has apparently been making rather loud claims in certain London establishments about his sister's good fortune. He has been telling anyone who will listen that you have ensnared a duke, that you will soon be a duchess, that your family's financial troubles will be over once the wedding takes place. No, 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 no. He has also been borrowing money on the strength of that connection, significant sums, from people who do not take kindly to being deceived." Thessaly's legs gave out. She sank into the nearest chair, her head spinning. "I did not know," she managed. "I did not tell him anything. I wrote to my mother about being a companion. Nothing more." "I believe you." The Dowager's voice held something that might have been sympathy. "But it does not matter what you knew or did not know. What matters is what society believes. Lady Blackwood has ensured that this story will spread. By tomorrow, everyone will know that Miss Thessaly Vance is either a fortune hunter who conspired with her brother to trap a duke, or a fool whose family has destroyed any chance she had at respectability." The walls were closing in. Thessaly could feel them pressing against her, crushing the fragile hope she had allowed herself to feel. "What about Caius? Does he know?" "He will be told when he returns this evening." "But Miss Vance..." The Dowager leaned forward, her expression grave. "You must understand what this means. Even if Caius believes you innocent, even if he wants to continue whatever has begun between you, he cannot. The scandal would be too great. His position, his family, his responsibilities to the estate. He cannot sacrifice all of that for a woman whose brother has made her unmarriageable. I am not asking him to sacrifice anything. You do not have to ask. He will offer. That is who he is." The Dowager's voice softened. "And that is why you must leave before he returns." The words landed like physical blows. "Leave? Tonight. Before he can make promises he cannot keep. Before the situation becomes even more impossible." The Dowager rose, moving to a writing desk in the corner. "I have arranged a carriage to take you to your family's home. I have also written you a letter of reference that makes no mention of any romantic entanglement. It speaks only of your time as Odette's companion and your excellent character." She pressed the letter into Thessaly's numb hands. "This is not cruelty, Miss Vance. It is kindness. If you stay, you will watch Caius destroy himself trying to protect you from a scandal that cannot be contained. If you leave, he will be hurt, but he will survive. And someday, perhaps, he will thank you for having the courage to do what he could not." Thessaly stared at the letter, her vision blurring with tears she refused to shed. "He will hate me. Perhaps. For a time." The dowager's hand rested briefly on her shoulder. "But hate is better than ruin. For both of you." She left Thessaly alone with the weight of an impossible choice. 2 hours later, as the winter sun began its descent toward the horizon, Thessaly Vance climbed into a carriage with her small bag of belongings and the letter of reference that was all she had to show for her time at Ashworth Hall. She left 2 letters behind. One for Odette, thanking her for her kindness. One for Caius. The second letter had taken 6 attempts to write. In the end, she had kept it simple. "Your Grace, I have returned home. Please do not try to find me. What happened between us was real. I want you to know that. But real is not the same as possible, and I will not be the reason your family name is destroyed. You asked me once what I wanted for myself. I wanted you, but wanting something does not make it right. Please open your father's letter. Whatever it says, you deserve to know, and you deserve to stop punishing yourself for things that were never your fault. I will remember these weeks for the rest of my life. Yours, in whatever way I can be." Thessaly, she had left the sapphire pendant on her pillow. She had no right to keep it now. The carriage rattled through the gates of Ashworth Hall, and Thessaly watched through the window as the great house grew smaller and smaller behind her. She had done the right thing. She was certain of it. So why did the right thing feel exactly like dying? Home was smaller than Thessaly remembered. The modest cottage where her mother took in mending, and her father sat by the window, staring at nothing. The worn furniture and patched curtains, and the smell of cabbage soup that meant they were counting pennies again. She had been back for 4 days. 4 days of her mother's worried glances, and her father's silence, and the conspicuous absence of Gareth, who was apparently hiding from creditors in London, and too ashamed to show his face. Thessaly went through the motions of normal life, helped with the mending, walked to the market, read to her father in the evenings, though he rarely seemed to hear her. She did not cry. What was the point of crying? On the 5th day, Felix Finch arrived at the door. He was a wiry man with sharp eyes and a sharper smile, the architect of so many of Gareth's failed schemes. Thessaly had met him only once before and had disliked him instantly. "Miss Vance," he said, sweeping into their tiny parlor uninvited, "you are remarkably difficult to locate. I was not aware anyone was looking. Someone most definitely is." Felix settled into a chair with the casual confidence of someone who believed himself welcome everywhere. "The Duke of Ashworth has been tearing London apart for the past 3 days, searching for you. He has questioned your brother quite thoroughly. I believe Gareth may have wet himself." Thessaly's heart lurched despite her best efforts to remain calm. "The Duke should not be looking for me. I left a letter explaining everything." "Yes, a letter. How romantic." Felix's smile turned sardonic. "Unfortunately, letters do not satisfy a man who has apparently decided that you are essential to his continued existence. He sent me to find you, Miss Vance. He wants you to return to London." "No." He was quite insistent. I said no. Thessaly stood, moving to the window. "I left for his protection. If I return, the scandal will destroy him." "What scandal?" Felix looked genuinely confused. "The gossip about your brother?" "Yes. Lady Blackwood made certain everyone would know." "Ah." Felix rose, joining her at the window. "I see you have not heard the latest developments. How delightfully dramatic this will be." "What developments?" "The Duke addressed the scandal directly. Publicly. At Lady Hertford's musical 3 nights ago." Felix's eyes gleamed with the pleasure of someone delivering spectacular news. He stood before half the ton and announced that your brother's foolish claims were just that. Foolish. He stated that you were a guest in his home, nothing more, and that any suggestion otherwise was slander, that he would pursue through legal channels if necessary. Thessaly's legs went weak. He did what? Oh, it gets better. He then turned to Lady Araminta, who was sitting directly in front of him, and informed her that he had no intention of marrying her, had never had any such intention, and would appreciate it if she and her mother would stop spreading lies about innocent people to further their own ambitions. Her hand found the window frame, steadying herself. The Blackwoods left in disgrace. Lady Araminta was crying. Her mother was threatening lawsuits. The Duke simply returned to his seat and watched the rest of the music hall as if nothing had happened. Felix laughed. It was, I am told, magnificent. But the scandal, his reputation. His reputation is that of a man who defends those under his protection, which, if you think about it, is considerably better than being known as the Devil of Ashworth Hall. Felix's expression softened slightly. He did not sacrifice himself, Miss Vance. He clarified the truth. Your brother is a fool, not a conspirator. You are a victim of gossip, not a fortune hunter. And the Blackwoods are revealed as the social climbers everyone already suspected them of being. Thessaly's mind reeled. She had left to protect him. She had broken her own heart to save his future, and he had simply fixed it. There is one more thing, Felix said, reaching into his coat. He asked me to give you this. He pressed a small velvet box into her hands, the sapphire pendant, its silver chain coiled like a sleeping serpent. He said to tell you that it was a gift, that gifts do not come with conditions, and that if you choose not to return, he will respect that choice. But he needs you to know that the choice is yours, not society's, not your brother's, not anyone else's. Yours. Thessaly opened the box, staring at the deep blue stone that had rested against her heart for those brief, beautiful days. He also said one more thing. Felix moved toward the door. He said that he finally opened the letter. Her head snapped up. His father's letter? The very one. He would not tell me what it said. Only that you were right, and that he wished he had been brave enough to read it sooner. Felix paused at the doorway, his usual sardonic expression replaced with something almost sincere. I have known many men, Miss Vance. I have known schemers and dreamers and fools of every variety. But I have never known a man who would stand before society and defend a woman's honor simply because it was the right thing to do. He smiled. A carriage is waiting outside. The choice, as he said, is yours. He left. Thessaly stood alone in the tiny parlor, clutching the sapphire pendant, her heart racing. Her mother appeared in the doorway, her eyes bright with unshed tears. I heard everything, she said softly. Through the kitchen door. Mama, when your father lost everything, I wanted to run, to hide from the shame. Her mother crossed the room, taking Thessaly's hands. But running does not make the wanting go away. It just makes you wonder what might have been. I am afraid. Good. That means it matters. Her mother squeezed her hands. Go, my darling. Go find out if this love is worth fighting for. And if it is, fight with everything you have. 20 minutes later, Thessaly was in the carriage, the sapphire pendant around her neck, traveling back toward the life she had tried to leave behind. The Westenholm Winter Ball was the event of the season. Anyone who was anyone would be there, which meant that everyone who wanted to see the Duke of Ashworth's next move would also be there. The scandal of the musical had only increased public interest. The ton was hungry for drama, and Caius Ravencroft had promised to deliver. Thessaly stood at the entrance to the ballroom, her heart pounding so loudly she was certain everyone could hear it. The ivory gown with silver thread felt different now. Not a costume, not armor, just a beautiful dress worn by a woman who had finally stopped running. Odette had greeted her return with tears and embraces and 1,000 questions that Thessaly promised to answer later. The dowager had simply nodded, her expression unreadable, though something in her eyes suggested she was not entirely displeased to have been proven wrong. And Caius had not been at the house when she arrived. He was already here, at the ball, waiting. "Miss Thessaly Vance?" the major domo announced. The ballroom fell silent. Every head turned, every eye fixed upon her. She could feel the weight of their judgment, their curiosity, and their hunger for scandal. She lifted her chin and walked forward. The crowd parted before her like water before a ship's prow. She saw familiar faces, Lady Hartford looking intrigued, Sir Percival looking confused, Crispin Threlfall looking artistic. She saw unfamiliar faces, hundreds of them, all watching, all waiting. And then she saw him. Caius stood at the center of the ballroom, dressed in formal black and white. His black hair swept back from that face she had dreamed of every night since leaving. His gray eyes found hers across the crowded room, and everything else fell away. He walked toward her, his stride unhurried, confident, and inevitable. The crowd's whispers rose and fell like waves, but neither of them looked away from the other. When he reached her, he stopped. Close enough to touch, close enough that she could see the emotion burning in his eyes, carefully controlled but unmistakable. "You came back," he said quietly. "You gave me a choice. And you chose this." His voice dropped. "You chose me. I chose us." She reached up, her hand resting on his chest, feeling his heartbeat strong and steady beneath her palm. Whatever that means, whatever that costs. The orchestra had stopped playing. The entire ballroom held its breath. Caius looked around at the sea of watching faces, then back at her. A smile touched his lips, small and private and utterly devastating. "Then perhaps," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "I should make certain there is no further confusion about my intentions." He dropped to one knee. The collective gasp that rose from the crowd could have shattered glass. Thessaly Vance. His voice rang clear and strong across the silent ballroom. "You fell into my life on a frozen road, and you changed everything. You made me want to live again. You made me believe that love was worth the risk. You made me brave enough to open a letter I had been too afraid to read for 8 months. She was crying. She did not care. "I am not offering you wealth, or title, or position. Those are accidents of birth, not gifts I can give. What I am offering you is my heart, broken as it is. My future, uncertain as it may be. My promise that I will spend every day trying to be worthy of the faith you have placed in me." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a ring, a simple band of gold set with a single sapphire that matched the pendant at her throat. "Will you marry me?" The question echoed through the ballroom, through the years of loneliness and grief and fear, through all the walls he had built and she had climbed. Thessaly looked down at this man, this wounded, wonderful man who had offered her his heart in front of everyone who had ever doubted them. "Yes," she said, her voice clear despite the tears. 1,000 times, yes. He rose and kissed her, right there in the middle of the Westenholm ballroom, in front of society and scandal and the entire watching world. And when they finally broke apart, breathless and laughing, the applause that erupted around them was thunderous. She caught sight of Odette, weeping happily into Crispin Threlfall's artistic cravat. The dowager stood at the edge of the crowd, and though her expression remained stern, she nodded once, just once. It was enough. "I love you," Thessaly whispered against Caius's lips. "I love you too." He smiled, fully, genuinely, the first true smile she had ever seen from him in public. Now and forever. Whatever comes, she echoed, and as the orchestra began to play, and the crowd surged forward with congratulations and questions, Thessaly Vance, future Duchess of Ashworth, held on to the man she loved and finally allowed herself to believe in happy endings. 6 months later, Thessaly stood in the library of Ashworth Hall, cataloging the collection that was now officially hers as much as it had ever been anyone's. The wedding had been small and private, exactly as they both wanted. Family only, plus a few close friends. Gareth had appeared, sober and chastened, having finally found legitimate work through connections Felix had helped arrange. Their father had walked her down the aisle, present in a way he had not been for years, tears streaming down his weathered face. The honeymoon had been spent in Italy, tracing the footsteps of Caius's mother and finally laying her ghost to rest. They had found her grave in Naples, tended it, planted flowers, said goodbye. Caius had wept for the first time since his father's death, and Thessaly had held him through it, understanding that grief was not weakness, but the price of having loved. Now they were home, truly home, in a way neither of them had expected to find. She was shelving a volume of philosophy when she came across it, tucked between 2 larger books, as if hidden there long ago. A slim leather journal, its pages yellowed with age. Her mother-in-law's diary. Thessaly hesitated, then opened it carefully. The entries were brief, fragmentary, the inner thoughts of a woman struggling against expectations that had crushed her slowly. And then, near the end, an entry that stopped her heart. I watch my son, and I see his father in every line of his face. I love him. God help me. I love him so much it terrifies me. But I'm not strong enough to stay. Something is broken in me. Something that cannot be fixed by love or duty, or beautiful children who deserve better than a mother, who cannot breathe within these walls. If I stay, I will destroy them with my misery. If I leave, I will destroy them with my absence. There is no right choice. There is only survival. I hope someday Caius will understand. I hope someday he will forgive me for being too weak to be what he needed. I hope someday he will know that leaving was not because I didn't love him enough, but because I loved him too much to let him watch me disappear piece by piece. My beautiful boy, my darling son, live, be happy. Love someone who is strong enough to stay. That is the only blessing I can give you. Thessaly was still holding the journal, tears streaming down her face, when Caius found her. He did not ask what she had discovered. He simply gathered her into his arms and held her while she cried. She loved you, Thessaly whispered when she could speak again. She was broken, but she loved you. I know. His voice was thick. My father's letter, it said much the same thing. That she was ill in ways they didn't understand, that he should have gotten her help instead of letting her suffer alone, that his greatest regret was not saving her, not my absence when he died. Forgiveness, Thessaly breathed, just as the dowager said. Forgiveness, he pulled back, cupping her face in his hands. For both of us, from both of them. A gift I didn't know I needed until you made me brave enough to receive it. They stood together in the library, surrounded by books and memories and the ghosts of loves that had come before. Outside, spring was finally arriving, melting the last of the winter snow, coaxing green shoots from the dark earth. I have something for you, Caius said, reaching into his pocket. Something I found in my father's desk, along with the letter. He pressed a small object into her hands. It was a compass, old and brass, its needle still true despite the years. It was his father's, and his father's before that, passed down through generations. Caius smiled softly. He wrote in the letter that it was meant for my future wife, someone who could help me find my way when I was lost. Thessaly turned the compass over in her hands, watching the needle swing and settle, pointing steadily north. You found your way, she said. You found me. He kissed her forehead. There is a difference. She laughed, pulling him close, feeling the steady beat of his heart against her own. They were still imperfect, still learning, still navigating the complications of society and family, and two broken people trying to build something whole together. But they were alive. They were together, and they had stopped running from love. The end. And on the anniversary of that frozen night, every year without fail, they would stand at the window of the library and watch the first snow of winter fall over the grounds of Ashworth Hall. "Remember when you nearly ran me down with your carriage?" Thessaly would ask. "Remember when you stood in my drive like a frozen ghost?" Caius would counter. And they would laugh, holding each other close, grateful for accidents and second chances, and the stubborn courage that had brought them through the darkness into light. Some stories begin with once upon a time. Theirs began with the cold and the night, and a single point of light in the distance, calling her home to a place she had never been, to a man she had not yet met, to a life she could not have imagined. And it ended, as the best stories do, with love. Thank you for being here. You are the reason these stories exist, because you believe in love that chooses courage over convenience, in characters who fight for happiness despite the odds, in endings that feel earned and true. Your presence makes this space warm and welcoming, and I am grateful for every moment you spend with these characters. Do you have a favorite line or scene? Your engagement helps me understand what moves you, what keeps you listening, and what kinds of stories to create next. Consider subscribing if you would like more romances with emotional depth and genuine character growth. Thank you for being here. You make this community what it is.